Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the 1619 Lingering Imprint presentation. Today we have a special guest, Miss Alma Stokes, who everybody in Pasadena area knows. She's been around here active and teaching for 70 years, and she not only knows everybody, she knows their children too, and they know her. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing her. I wouldn't have time to go through it. She's been recognized many times for her work in social justice here in the Pasadena area. And today she's going to give us an overview and tell us where she thinks we are and what we're doing today and what we need to look out for. So with that, Alma, I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away.
Okay, thank you. When I'm going to, after decades of time, I'm going to give you an overview of what I think and where we are and what we're doing. I thought I would do that first, and then I would talk about my childhood, my mother experience, my experiences in the community, in my involvement in church and family and neighborhoods. And when I look back over these years and stuff, I realize that I have achieved by instinct, mother wit, diverse methods, white help, despite an undercurrent of white power to deal with. And this has gone on through the years, and other people have had this same, other Black people have had the same experiences and done the same thing that I have done. And I saw this I learned it from my parents. But even with all of that, I still have hope for positive change, even as what's going on right now. It's still There's still hope, and you can't give up hope. And we haven't really succeeded despite all our world relations, because there has been such Black successes and things in all these different places that the basic white person is afraid of, not everyone, is afraid of Black takeover, and instead, and less of white privilege, which is taken for granted and not really understood and realizing, and they don't want to see it change. And so what I think is programs like yours that are telling the truth, and programs uh, that you're sharing lives and things and talking to people and getting to know one another has made a difference. And when we really look at history, America was made on the backs of Black people. It just wasn't told. And now we're beginning to find out a lot of these things. And many people are trying to make changes and not let this kind of thing be. They don't want this to happen. And so they're working hard to bring about change that we need to have here in America, in Pasadena, and we're seeing it every day. There is something where there's been positive stuff. And when I think in the realm of race relations, there's still hope, but we have to educate from preschool on up. We have to expose people to this false Christianity movement, the mockery of Christianity. We've got to work on our one sided media to be fair, just be fair and tell the truth. And we have to find ways to move away from the need of power and money. And that seems to be what what we work on, is money and power. And that's what changes so many things. But still, we always have hope. And I would say we've come a long ways, and we just have to keep fighting and going on. Now, those are the questions I hope I answered. And if you want, ask me any questions, you're free to do so. And what I would start with is that I got married in 1951, and we moved to Los Angeles. I was in San Bernardino, my husband was from Riverside. And we lived in very nice homes at that time, but I hated LA. I didn't want to live in LA, even though I did work in LA at the time. And so I wanted to come to Pasadena. So in 1953, I was able to move here. And when I was a child, my father used to bring us to the Rose Parade every year. And we would drive around in the beauty and the trees and the flowers and the nice homes in the black areas. I just and the churches were really big, and the churches were the main part of the black community in Pasadena. And when I was a child, I always heard of Pasadena. It's the place and the people and what they have and what they're doing. And our music, we had many top musicians and that played the pipe organ at the churches. And well, it passed at First AME, which I belonged to. And that was my father was an African Methodist Episcopal preacher. So uh, having all that as a background, Pasadena was the place, and all my husband's friends were in Pasadena, and he was working at Lockheed at the time, and so that's the reason why I ended up here in 1953, one house away from the house I started out in. And now and let me go to where I lived in. I grew up in San Bernardino, and it was a prejudiced place, but you worked around it. And my father being the AME minister, and he had been a teacher in St. Louis before he went to the seminary to become a minister. And he was always involved, and my mother was always involved in the community. This was just the way you did, and you also had the church community that you were involved with, and people in the town used to come to our home for help from my father, because a lot of people didn't have the education in my day, long time ago. And in a town, so Pasadena was small. I mean, San Bernardino was small during that time. We only had one high school and three junior highs. And the main one that I went to was Sturgis, which was in the middle of the town. And it was integrated. And then we had an area called Valley Truck Farm, which was out. That's where the orange show that you hear about was just beyond the orange show, going east was the Valley Truck Farms where they grew. They had hogs and all kinds of animals, and they grew vegetables to sell to all around, and that's why it was called a truck farm. Well, those kids, most of those were black kids, and they went up to the 8th grade there in Valley Truck Farm. And so I was in the regular schools, but we had two schools in San Bernardino. One was Ramona, and the other was Alessandro. And all the Mexican kids had to go there unless they knew their rights. And my mother made sure a lot of our neighbors, because we lived in going back, my father was moved by the bishop to Independence, Kansas. And my mother was having her 11th child, and she had been in snow all her life. She grew up in St. Louis, along with my father grew up in St. Louis. And then all the churches were in Missouri and Idaho. And when I was born, it was in Everett, Washington. He was presiding elder, so he had to travel, but he had to travel by train. We didn't have planes in those. You had planes, but not for use in those days. And so, anyway, the bishop moved my father to Riverside and then to San Bernardino, and my mother got a taste of California and sunshine, and she said, "I am not going to move again." And one of the ladies in the church bought this home that we lived in. I don't know the setup and everything, but I lived in it a lifetime until I left in 51. And so this was one of the things that the kids that would go to Alessandro, they were then supposed to go to the high school, but most of them were dropouts and they didn't go on. One or two would go on from there to our schools, our high school, which was one, and the people in Rialto, all this around Big Bear, all came to that one high school. Anyway, I went on. I went to the San Bernardino Valley College, and in all the schools, I played in the orchestras and the bands, and I was involved in the women's. It was WIA was the Women's Association, Athletic Association, and we had the one at high school. I belonged to it too, and so when I was at San Bernardino Valley College, um, they had a class, and this class, if you took this class, they were supposed to find you a job during Christmas. And so I took the class and I enjoyed that class. And then the professor uh, called me in and he said, uh, I can't give you a class like the others, but there is a job that you can work in the restrooms at Sears. I told him I don't even clean the toilets at home. I'm not good. There is no way I'm going to do that. And that was a really bad experience for me. It hurt a lot, and then trying to get jobs was very hard. Uh, and if you were black, you couldn't get a job unless you worked in back parts of the stores or something like that. And so my parents were they were constantly fighting for change in San Bernardino while my father was still there. He started another church in San Bernardino out in the Valley Truck Farm area. And when he started that church, he took it into the connection, the conference connection, and then the bishop could move him. And so my father was moved, but my mother said, I'm not going. She'd go and visit, but she would not go to any of the other churches where he was moved to. Anyway, uh, I had a chance to go to UCLA, but I was too late because I was waiting for this money. And so I went to Santa Monica City College and took classes, which gave me college credit. And I had already gotten my AA from San Bernardino Valley College. And so when I was there, I in Santa Monica, I worked in a burger place for a bit, and I worked at a it was a nursery, very famous nursery. All the movie stars used to come there and get their stuff. And when that job played out, I had to go back to San Bernardino, and I decided, and then I couldn't get a job there. And by that time, my husband used to come out and visit me when I was out there in Westwood, and so he got a job at Lockheed. So he stayed in LA, and then so in 51 we got married, and from there, when I first got married, I went to the telephone company, and at that time I was in my prime. I looked good. I would fit any kind of office at that time, and I could do the work. So I went to the telephone company, passed all their tests, and they said, "We have a job for you." And I was excited. Then they called me in and they said, "We can't give you that job because your husband is 1A and he will be going he'll be in the service and you will follow him. But found out later that the only reason I didn't get the job was because the person that was supposed to be leaving this job in Los Angeles in a black area didn't leave. So that's why I didn't get the job. So I took the county test and I passed it. And they called me to the Register of Voters. And I worked there. And when I worked there before I moved to Pasadena, and then I worked there after I had moved to Pasadena at the Register of Voters when everybody in LA County filled out forms and we'd alphabetize them. Then we'd put them into a place where you could pull out a tray and find out everything you want to know about that person. And that was how it was done before all these changes that we have now. And also, then I started working at the Terminal Annex, which was across the street from Olivera Street, and the Terminal Annex was post office, and that's where they did all the main post office things in LA. They had all the separate post office, the small ones, but this was the main post office where he had the registry, and I worked in the registry. And when they brought in, it was, I can't remember what it's called at the time, but they would have people that would tell them when to send the trays. And when they started that automation, I used to be the person that called for the trays and telling them when to send them and so forth, as well as working in the ed registry. When I worked in the registry, I dressed up with heels and knits. And what happened is when I was filling someone's place in the registry. And so when that person came back, I had to go back on the floor. Well, I went back there was only one other lady that worked in that part of the Terminal Annex where I did the where we used to send, I have to think about that. It was when we would send a special letter. I forget what you call it now at the moment, but the special letter, I would work with those kind of letters and stuff. And so I was seated, but many times I'd have to go and we would put the mail into bags, and you'd close the bags, and I would put the bags on top of on these big trucks, and I'm in high heels, and I would take them up to the third floor, which for the helicopters, and and so the man and the head of that department, that three floors, Burtonall, he decided he didn't want me to be in that part of the post office. And so that's why he had me taking those trucks and doing all that. Well, all these big shots were there one time, and I'm pushing that truck in my high heels and my nips, and he was embarrassed. And so I got back on the regular floor. But I've had lots of different experiences. And when I in 1950 in 1950 53, well, 52, my husband passed, and I had 4 little children, and so I had to raise those kids. And my brother, who was a teacher in LA, and then he moved to San Francisco. But every time I would see him, you need to go back to school. You need to go back to school. And so finally, when I realized that I'm working at all these different jobs, I might as well do something that I've always wanted to do all my life. I used to make the kids play school. And when I was at the First AME church, before the freeway took it, I used to put on big programs there, and we worked with the teenagers, and people thought I had my degree. I didn't have it. So I went back to school, and I finished in 63. And so I was, uh, I was ready to go to work in Pasadena. I wanted to teach. And you knew if you were teaching in Pasadena, you could go to Lincoln, you could go to Cleveland, Garfield, Washington Elementary. I may have missed one. I'm not sure whether Altadena was in on that. It may have been one or two. And so I started working at Washington Elementary. And while I was there at Washington Elementary, the summer before that, the OBA, Outward Bound Adventures, were trying to decide, and they were going to get government things to start OBA. And so they took a trial trip to the John Muir Trail. So I had a van at the time, and I had been doing a lot of outdoor stuff all my life, and classes that I had taken and stuff. And so I took my two nephews and my daughter, and I joined them, and I filled up my car. It was a van. People didn't have many vans in those days. Well, I had the van. In fact, I had the first van in Pasadena, and then the policeman got it after that. But anyway, I had other students that I took that traveled in the van with me, and we went on the trip. We went to the John Muir Trail, and my father had become ill that night that we were supposed to leave. And so I said, well, I'll check, I'll leave, and then I'll see what's happening when we get to a place with a telephone. So when I called at the Devil's Pot, a stockpile or something like that's the name of it, and I called, and he wasn't doing that well. And so I decided that I was going to leave. And they sent some other students home with me. I had my nephews and my daughter, but they sent all these other kids home because they weren't going to be able to make it. And this gave them an opportunity to be able to go home. So, anyway, I brought them all home, and then the whole group that was left, it was August, and they were in a snowstorm. And we had these black tents that looked like these like these black plastic bags you see. And these tents, they had to cut some of them up and wrap them around the kids' feet because they had tennis shoes. They didn't have regular boots. And luckily, because we had left them with more food, they had food, but they had to fix the food and eat in the tents in order to, and they had to wait till the storm was over, and then they were able to go out. And so it was an experience, but they were able to start OBA from that. And so I showed films of that at Washington Elementary. And when I showed the films, I said, we're going to start a science club. And so if you're interested in this kind of thing, join up. And so I had a diverse group. What few diverse people were still there at Washington Elementary? There were a few. And so these kids, I took them, we would go on up to Henniker Flat all the time, and we'd come back, and we would take our dinner up there. And they had a museum and tables and things. And so we'd leave school and we'd go up, and then we'd eat, and then we'd come back down. We had flashlights, and we'd sing like the song Amen, but we added our own. We'd say we're having fun. Amen, amen. We're having fun. Anyway, we would do that, and then we camped in Millard Canyon overnight, and we went to Santa Barbara. And when we went to Santa Barbara, our place wasn't ready. We didn't have our campsite ready, so my father had the church in Santa Barbara, so we used his special room where they had the kitchen and dining. And so the kids slept in their sleep bags on the dining room floor, and we fixed the breakfast. And then we took them all over Santa Barbara, and but we were able to go to our campsite after
Well,
that.
Alma, let me ask you a question here at this point, if that's okay.
Sure.
You mentioned a couple of situations, now several situations where you had discrimination that you experienced personally. I realize you're probably not in the job market in the same way today, but where do you think we are today? Do you think that that situation has changed? And can you give any examples of people that you talk to or anything you know about it that would tell us, where you think we are with that kind of situation today?
It depends, and it's where we are. There are good people that help open doors for people to do. Now, my grandson, he went to when he went to school, uh, and well, no, I'll take my own son, Reuben. He was at Poly, and he went from Poly to Dartmouth. Because he went to Dartmouth, it opened doors for him that he wouldn't have normally had. And so he worked in uh, different organizations, big ones, like he was in the he worked at he ended up in Florida because of what's the place? I'll tell you in a minute. Anyhow, um, they brought him to there, and then he worked uh, why am I'm trying to think too fast. Anyway, through all his work experiences, he was in the supervisory and that type of thing. And his son had the ability to go to. He ended up at Ross School of Business, and he has a fabulous job. And so many of the young people that have gone away to school and had those opportunities, then they have been able to get good jobs, and I mean really good jobs,
So
because
that
he was.
sounds like you think there's been some real social improvement in that
Oh,
way that
definitely. Oh,
you know.
yes. And once in a while you find it, but somehow or another, there are people or things that you work around and you make it anyway. And that's what a lot of people have done. In my time, it was a lot harder. But I was able to open by pushing my children. My daughter worked at the Getty. She was in development, and she put on big programs at the Getty. She worked there when it was down in Santa Monica, and from there, then they built the big Getty that she's there, and she had her special office in the part of Getty that she worked in, where she had all these different people come and speak, and programs that she had, like August Wilson, he was there many times. And uh, during that time that she was working, and then she also did LA a subject, and she had a group like Jean Poole, and that goes to All Saints. She's 100 years old. Well, Jean Poole was one of the advisors, and she worked with this LA a subject until she made it's a big book, and it is SC. It belongs to SC now. The Getty gave it to SC, and they have there are people there that work with it. They work with every kind of group that's in existence, where they can work and they can let people know what they're doing and everything about them, and help them have programs or whatever it is. I can't tell you too much about it, but there is a book on LA a subject if you're interested in finding out
Okay, so
more.
you feel the job situation you feel like is way better in an identifiable way. You've been involved in a lot of efforts to promote social justice throughout the many years you've been active here. Can you give us an example of a situation where you took some particular action and you feel like it was a success and really made some progress? Have you got any stories like that you could tell us about efforts that you worked on, where you were actively involved in doing something and felt like it was a success? Tell us a couple of stories
Oh,
like that.
one of the things is we had a women's console at All Saints.
Hmm.
And so there was this women council had groups, and there was this mission group that they were started. They had that was one of the groups, and I joined the mission group. And so we were trying to decide what we were going to do. And there was this one lady, Mrs. Hughes, who had the idea we need to do something to help these kids that are misused and that have to tell their story and they have to tell it to so many different people. It's hard on these kids. And so we studied the one they had out in Santa Monica at there's a Santa Monica Hospital, St. John. Then we went to one in San Bernardino and checked it out. So we decided we were going to start us, and we met and met and met until we got it together. And then we ended up with a place in Sierra Madre where, and oh, in the process of trying to get more money, my daughter wrote the first proposal grant, and then we had to pay people to do grants. And so as a result, we had this place out in Sierra Madre in the Methodist church owned this house that was way out. You wouldn't know it was there, and that's where we had our offices, and that's where the kids were met. And we, in order to get more money, we found out if we did domestic violence, that was another means of open, working the means of getting money. And so uh, we called it Grace Center, and Katrina Carter was the head of it, and she was a sculptor, and we have a sculpture, and that is there. I guess it's at 5 acres now. I don't know where it is, but we have pictures. We were all given pictures of that sculpture that she made because she was tremendous. That's just one little thing that we worked hard. And then Mrs. Pettit was my good friend who used to help me take kids around, and she was interested in everything that I did. And in fact, when I was teaching at Washington Junior High, the Armenians came, and we didn't have an ESL at that time, and so I was the ESL teacher. I used to do the testing and stuff like that. So I was working with the Armenian kids, and there were two girls. This was later on. I At that time she worked. She also worked with a young lady, Lena Ko, and Lena came from. She lived in Japan, but she was Chinese, Taiwan, and she had a hard time in schools in Japan. Her family brought them to America, so she had English. And Mrs. Pettit used to pick her up every day and take her to the school. They gave her, Mrs. Pettit, a key to the room, and she would work with these three kids at different times and help them to learn to deal with their lessons, and they could ask her questions about things they didn't understand. And she was on a TV program where she was um, she they gave her a beautiful sculpture of children, uh, a queen for a day, something like that, a long time ago. That was one thing. I've had a lot of different things that I have to think about You know, you
Okay,
have
let
to
me
be
ask
all.
you a little more about that effort that you did at All Saints. Now, I'm assuming that that was a diverse group of women that you were working with that formed
Yes.
that group, and that it
Uh-huh.
was a diverse set of children that you were
Oh,
dealing with.
yes. Those kids, many of them were they were Black. A lot of them were
Uh-huh.
Black children, and we had to work with all kinds of other people to try to get this program to where it was, and let people know that the program it was in existence. Um, uh, Ask me some more questions.
Well,
I've lost.
tell us a little bit more about that program, how it went, and and the other question that comes up in my mind is, we're dealing now with the history of St. Barnabas as being a split off from All Saints, but you're talking now about a diverse group of women in All Saints. So how did that come about? And tell us something about how you feel about how that worked and how it came about. And
Well, let me tell you about St. Barnabas.
okay.
I went to St. Barnabas
Mhm.
when the freeway took our church. Then at AME, I ended up at Brown Memorial, which was on Orange Grove near Fair Oaks, and I couldn't stay there. And my mother stayed there. My mother had to come and live with me because her doctor was up here and she couldn't keep going back and forth to San Bernardino. Anyway, she stayed there, but I left Brown Memorial, and my sister and I were riding around, and no, we went to it's where Parsons is now. That was Scott's Methodist, a big, beautiful brick church. So we went there one Sunday. The next Sunday we went there, and that was the last Sunday. And so when we went there the next Sunday, no church. And so we rode around, and so we said, let's go into St. Barnabas. And so we went in and found out so much of it. We were Methodist Episcopal. That's Episcopal. And all our liturgy and things in the AME church are the same as the Episcopal church. Almost everything, not total, because it's more towards Catholic. And we were Methodist too. So anyway, we uh we went there, and so I sang in the choir. I was there at St. Barnabas, and then we found out that a long time ago that had been a mission. It had just changed from a mission to a rectory when I went there, but it was a mission, and it was put there. There were these women that put it together, but they got money from the rich people at All Saints because they didn't want their servants being in the same church with them. And so what they did is they started a St. Barnabas, which was up in the I was on Fair Oaks, where there was Pasadena had all kinds of on Fair Oaks. You had the NAACP, you had a newspaper, you had a credit union, you had bank, you had stores, and you had pharmacies, you name it, on Fair Oaks. And that's where they put St. Barnabas. And it was there for years. And one of the top persons that did all the embroidery and stuff like that for the cathedral, she went to St. Barnabas. She lived to be 105, and she was kin to Hall Johnson, who used to do black spirituals for the movies. And then he taught Jester Hairston, who used to put on programs that we would sing, that I was privileged to sing with him years ago, spirituals. And so, anyhow, there was a time at All Saints when they wanted to have a reconciliation and come together, and some of the black people that were there at All Saints, I mean at St. Barnabas, did not want it. And so it was dropped and it was let go. And that was some years ago. And then just recently, they have picked up this, oh, St. Barnabas, we have to reconcile ourselves to them and make up for what we've done. And all we need to do is tell the history of it. And then we need to do things together and work together. And my sister is a priest. She started out of All Saints. She is a full-fledged Episcopal priest. And you don't become a priest unless you go through a long thing of education and stuff. You don't just say, I want to be a priest. Anyhow, she was a teacher, and she taught in the school system. She got her master's. And so she became, she became a priest, and I've lost my thought. But anyway, she goes to St. Barnabas now. That's what I want to tell you.
Okay, well, let me pick up on something else.
Let me finish just this little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
St. Barnabas has a choir that they pay, all white. They have a priest, a woman, all white. She's white. They have a musician and director that plays the kind of organ that they have there, and he's white. That is all. That's St. Barnabas now. And the people that think that coming from All Saints that want to come and be a part of, they don't even know this. But because my sister's there, I know. And there are very few of the old timers that when I was there, they're there. And see, so now what's your other question? I just had to say that.
Okay, that's great. This is all very interesting. Now, St. Barnabas existed in order to take the people of color out of All Saints, but then you were telling the story about being part of a women's group and a diverse group at All Saints. Tell us how did All Saints get back to that situation? What can you tell us about that?
There was a Father Wilkins who used to be head of the priest at St. Barnabas. And when he stopped being the priest at St. Barnabas, he ended up, and his wife lived to be 106, and that she was the head of the church at All Saints, Mrs. Wilkins. And they were there. They went to All Saints. And then there was Mrs. Moses, Virginia Moses, whose second cousin was the father of Black history. And her father helped start Allensworth, which is up there, up above Santa Barbara in California. The Allensworth, that was the all Black town that they changed. They changed where the train was going through, as well as the water system, so that the town would fail. And do you know about Allensworth?
I don't know. I'm not from California, remember?
Oh, that's a big history thing. And it started with people down in Monrovia, Pasadena, and places like that. It's a state park now. And thank you, Deborah, for saying that. And she says you should all go visit. It's a wonderful thing to go visit and to see it now. And the Prince family, which was one of the big families here, Margaret Prince was the first teacher they had up there. And see, Pasadena, San Bernardino, Riverside, Loma Linda, did I miss Monrovia, Duarte? All of those places, even when they were dealing with wagons, were intermarrying and involved in everything that was going on in all these different towns. And that's why when I said Pasadena was the place, it was the queen of all these different towns, in that what they had before the freeway wiped them out. And see, so anyway,
Well,
After
going
that,
back to All Saints, you were in a diverse group of women there. Were you one of the people who pioneered the kind of the reintegration of All Saints, or did that happen before you were there? Or what could you tell us about
no,
that?
no. In that time, there were different people for various reasons that had been going there for years. And they were participating in different parts. And then we got a black priest, Zelda, and
This is
she
at
was
All Saints you're talking
this is
about.
it
Yeah,
also.
right.
And
Yeah.
Zelda, because Zelda was there, brought more black people in. And when she first started, she wasn't treated that nice, but I'm telling you, when she ran that church for 19 months, and actually she had cancer and we lost her. But she people everywhere in that church, she was pastoral care, and I worked with her. I did the church part of pastoral care, and she was the overall minister of it. And people, everybody that talked about her talked like that was their best friend. Zelda was their best friend. She was that close to everybody, all kinds of people that were there at All Saints.
And what years were we talking about there
Don't
approximately?
ask me time, I can't tell you. Let me see. That was about let me see, about 8 years ago.
Oh, oh, longer.
About 8 years ago when
Eight?
Mike came. When Mike came, just before Mike came, Zelda ran that church. And then she had the cancer, got her. So do you remember Fritz?
No, no, by then I was no longer
And out there.
working
Oh.
there. So I wasn't active. I was busy doing my
So
fitness.
we had black people here and there in the church. And then when Mike came, he opened it up and a lot more people came in. And he tried very hard to prove that he was for diversity, and he overdid it. He should have just left things alone. And because he had done this at Ferguson in St. Louis when they had all that problem there, and he worked with those people and did a good job. And he's just a good man who really is sincere, but many times when we're so sincere, we forget how to, we overdo trying to prove a point. And so he opened the doors at All Saints for lots of different people and lots of different diversity. And some of it backfired on him. And I love Mike, but that was one of his weaknesses. He was too nice.
But you're talking about the current situation now.
That's right. But
Yeah.
all of that developed. See, when Zelda ran that church in between ministers, when Ed left, she was she had brought in a lot of more black people had come because of Zelda. She was tremendous in the town. And so and when Ed was there, um, a couple of people came, like my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. We used to go once a year to different churches. So I said, Ed, would you like to have our deltas come? And so he said, yeah. So we all came from all these ladies in red came from all different kinds of churches and stuff. And so we had we had the service there, and people had never been in an Episcopal church, and there were Baptists, Catholics, Buddhists, all types of people. And some of those people started going to All Saints because of it. They went back and they kept going back, and then they joined because it fed their needs. and they found out that they were accepted. It didn't make any difference if you came, so what? And that's what, with the lady, one of the ladies that was in our first beginning things when we started Grace Center, uh, she she went back to Malawi. She was here, and she's very close to Don Thomas. And you know, the Dr. Don Thomas that used to run the emergency at Huntington. Well, he used to go to Malawi and give his time, and people would line up their pictures of them waiting on the grass to see him. Anyway, and he's done that for like 14 years. Anyway, she was good friends with him, and she was one of those from our very beginning, just before she went back to Malawi. And she was head of the Secretary of Education when she went back there. And her children still live here in Pasadena. And she comes once in a while from Malawi here.
Now, this is interesting because we've got a white church that split off and made a black church. So then we had a white church and a black church, and now we've got each of them becoming more diverse in their own way. What do you think about that situation?
I think that's the way church ought to be. What difference does it make? You go where you're going to for your soul salvation, and you go there to find to find God. And so where you can go and you can feel like you are getting what you need to get from there and try to make your life better and live better, go where you need to go, and it doesn't matter. Just like Lake Avenue has all kinds of Black people now, and they're one of the most prejudiced places there is. That's my opinion.
It's interesting. I was at the Juneteenth celebration there at St. Barnabas, and that was very much, my impression was that was very much a kind of a joint congregation
It was mostly
service.
All Saints. It was
Uh-huh.
mostly All Saints. And
Uh-huh.
it was a special service. It wasn't a normal high church type service that they have at St. Barnabas. Anybody that went there like that, that was a beautiful day. And it was a wonderful service. And the music was great.
And do you see more of that kind of joint kind of service in the offing, or is that where you think things going, or was that a very special thing just because of Juneteenth, or is that going to be more commonly done, or what do you think about that?
That was a very special thing. And it was well done. The food, they say I didn't stay for food, but it was a lot of togetherness, and people really enjoyed themselves. However, now that we seem to have a problem at All Saints, I don't know what's going to happen within that. I don't know how many people. What they need to do is they need to go to services at St. Barnabas to see if this is the kind of place they want to be. And some of the people have said they're going to leave All Saints, and I don't know whether they're Black or white. It's just on email, and they're going to go to St. Barnabas. But I don't think they know what St. Barnabas is all about. A regular service. They're judging it by that big thing that we had because I was there.
Well, that's interesting. We have had a presentation about the project that some people at the two churches are working on, and they call their project Telling the Whole Story, and they're really just kind of trying to tell the whole story, but then work out whatever the reconciliation is going to be. And we had a discussion like that here on 1619. I think we're going to try to be following that. So I think there'll be
That's
more.
a good idea.
Yeah, I think there'll be more discussion that we'll have here on 1619. And in fact, I ran into Marco White this morning from St. Barnabas, and we had a long conversation talking about things that we might work on here in the 1619 and with Pasadena Village. So we've got some ideas that are just ideas that we're talking about at this point, but we'll see where that leads and see what we can do with that.
Okay.
So. What's your general feeling about where we are today and where you think we're headed? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? And what do you look at that makes you feel one way or the other?
I know that there are many people that are working hard to bring about change. So all I can do is have hope and hope things will be better. I want to see things better for my children, my grandchildren, and my great grandchildren. And so that is why whatever I can do, I can't do the things I used to do where I was totally involved. And so many things I can't even tell you. If I would tell you more stuff I've done, you would see. But uh, we have to just keep on doing what you're doing, like I said before, working together and giving people opportunities to know one another. That makes a difference, like you're doing with Marco. And see, Marco, his parents were very active in St. Barnabas when I was there. His mother, his grandmother, I meant his grandmother, and well, I don't know. Kitty didn't go to church that much in my time. She may have gone when I left, and see, so I can't make that judgment. But
Well, Marco's very proud of being third generation St. Barnabas. So, and his
that's
daughters
right.
and his daughters are fourth generation. So he's very
And
proud
that's
of that.
wonderful. And
Mhm.
I'm so happy to see him doing what he's doing.
Mhm.
And there's Williams, and then there's Deborah, and what's his first name? Williams. That are he's on the vestry. He's head of the vestry. Um, anyhow, they're some of the old timers that are still left. Now Sylvia Wiggins, her mother was one of those that started the church. And Sylvia, I talked to her the other day. She hasn't been at the church for some time because she's been ill. And she was one of those long time ago that was not for reconciliation. But I think now there is a change in her that she will see that this can be positive. And wherever you have God, you're going to have what you need. But if he's not there, there's useless for anything, is what I feel.
Okay, now you've had a lot of experience. You taught in the schools and taught in a lot of different schools around the area here. What's your feeling about where the schools are today?
Oh, let me tell you, we have the most segregated schools there are. We have, and here in Pasadena, the public schools. And Pasadena Education Foundation has worked so hard that we've made those kids have turned out and done so many fabulous things. We have so many fabulous programs and things for the schools, and we're constantly working at it and raising money for this purpose. That a lot of these that had people that had run to charter schools and private schools are coming back to our schools because they're finding out these, and people from La Cañada are bringing their kids to Pasadena public schools because we have good programs, but they're majority minorities, and that's back to what it was long time ago when you had basically black schools, all black schools, but you had fabulous teachers that made those schools what they and the people what they are. So uh, we have to work and keep on letting people and helping wherever we can to make our schools what they need to be, because these kids are our future. And if we don't teach them and we don't open up their minds and hearts and give them opportunities, we're going to lose totally. And that's why I said educate, start at the very beginning, preschool on up, and get these kids that once they've had experiences, they never lose it. They may go from it, but they come back. And so, uh, and we worked so hard with integration. In fact, Dr. Pitts came to the schools a long time ago. My daughter was in the 6th grade and her friend. And so Dr. Pitts said, this is before the court order. And so he said, if you open up these schools and they can get chance to learn and work together, it will be a positive thing. So the school district said, if you pay for your own transportation, your kids can go to school, go to any school that has that classrooms are small and they don't have the people. And all the black schools were coming out of the seams. There was too many in the schools. Anyway, my daughter and her friend and Helen Chris, who was also with OBA, Helen Chris and her son Neil and his friend Ray Cockrell are all 6th graders. And we decided we were going to take our kids to Don Benito. And I was working, so she would take them in the morning. I would pick them up. And if they wanted to be in any activities at the school, we'd make sure that we let them be involved. And it was so successful because we got letters from everybody there were kids that they had gone to Altadena. They had gone to what's the school up in Altadena? It starts with a B. I can't even think of it.
Burbank.
Burbank. Yes. Burbank. They were there and then the first black teacher to go to the east side of town was Regina Moses, the same one that I said was at All Saints. And Mr. Simmons was the principal, and he took Regina out there. And she ended up, she was principal at San Rafael when they had a lot of, not as much integration, but they had integration. And those parents loved her, period. And then she was at Willard. She monitored Kathy Inouye, who, when they had the highest scores in Pasadena, they thought they had cheated on the test. But Kathy had worked with those teachers and they had worked together and they worked with those kids. And that's why those kids did so well on tests. They did not cheat. And there's so many stories. But back to those others, when then they decided to open up Marshall for the junior high. And so at Marshall, my daughter, both my daughters were there. And the principal had a
color.
Huh? What?
That was my phone, sorry.
Oh, and anyhow, my daughters, they had the Mr. Keller who was principal, had all these black kids that had come to the school meet in the auditorium. And he said, you're not going to mess up my school. And gave them really a bad time. My girls came home upset and I called him. I told him, you are getting the cream of the crop from this west side of Pasadena. And I said, you're not getting trash. And I don't appreciate for you to treat my kids like this. And then one of my daughters had her head pushed into the drinking fountain. And because they did not prepare these kids, but they ended, and some of the teachers were not prepared, but they ended up those kids did well at Marshall and they got along. And then they ended up at Pasadena High School. And that's when Pasadena had championship bands and orchestras, and my girls were in it. And her friend Linda was concert mistress of the Pasadena High School Orchestra. And then we had girl drummers and Muir was famous for their drummers, all men, all boys. And these girls out drummed and they won the Arcadia drumming contest that was done every year what the kids did, Pasadena High School, that's when Alex Agajanian, there's, I can't think of all of them, but then Dougie Talaferro, my son Maitland Stokes played football, and they had championship football team at PHS. It was just a really good situation.
Now you're
there.
talking about when your children were in school there. So you're talking about probably
72.
40 years ago or something like that.
72, yes.
72. Okay.
This and 76, you know. This is because of integration and people learning how to get along together. And they're still, all these football players are still friends that are still here in Pasadena. Those that aren't in Pasadena are still in contact here because of what they, and their coaches. I can't think of both the coaches. Griffin was one, and the other one, Hamilton. Hamilton was a fabulous coach. He knew how to work with all kinds of people. And that's your secret. You have to work with everyone. The teachers have to know how to deal, even now. And they're supposed to be having classes and things where they open the door to teachers. We have a group where they come from all the schools of the kids that plan together, and they're from Blair and Pasadena High School. All the schools work together, and they have a lady leading them, and it's PEF sponsors this, and it's done wonders for the schools right now. And these are the kind of things we have to have. But the biggest thing is you have to let people know what's going on, and that makes a difference because
Go ahead.
people want to be a part of it, and they say, can I help, when they know. And there are so many good people out there, believe me. There've been so many that are ugly, but there's so many more that have given their lives and their time and tried to make a difference. And
Sounds like your prescription for social progress really comes down to people being together and getting to know one another and doing things together, and that leads to progress.
That's
it?
Okay. That's exactly. And once you do that, and once you open it up, at first people they don't like the idea, but if they give it a chance, sometimes it ends up so much better than it was, because each person has something to give to the group. And that's what makes the difference when you have it together and you understand and you know what is happening. We do this with food. You've got all these food places on TV and on radio where they share foods, and they're opening their minds and hearts to other people's food and find out how good it is. Most of us, half our food is Hispanic, tacos and all these kind of things, because we've picked it up and we've made it a part of our lives.
We are also hearing a lot more in publications and on news about some of the history of how things have been in the past. And I know recently, the whole issue of what happened in Tulsa back in the 20s has been in the news, and then Wilmington, North Carolina was another example of that same kind of thing, where a whole section of town was basically destroyed. So you think learning about those kinds of things is having an impact? Is that a positive thing that's becoming, that we're seeing presentations about that in books and movies and things like that? What do you think about that?
I think you need to know, but they have to be careful how they present it and how they do, because sometimes you can make it seem like it's something that's not even true and it's ugly or something ugly, instead of people having the opportunity to say, oh, this has happened, but we're not going to let it happen again. And so, but you can only do that when you give people chance to hear it, and they need to hear it. They need to know. There's a book, African American History AF, by, oh, what's his name? I have it in another room, but that he has shown some stuff that I never knew existed in slavery time and up to the present time. So we just need to hear these things. And some of them, some of the Black people have known this all along. And when you, lots of their books on slavery, and slavery, these slaves actually tell their own experiences, so that what you're hearing is true. It's not something that's made up. And people like to say this is made up. It's not true.
It's interesting. There's a group called Coming to the Table, which is a nationally organized group. And that's a group that was organized specifically to bring together the Black descendants of slaveholders as well as the white family descendants of slaveholders. And it's a national group with local chapters all over the place. And we had a story on the 1619 earlier where two people met and got acquainted and became friends and wrote a book called Cousins, because they were distant cousins. I think they were about 7 generations back, 6 or 7 generations back, where they had a common ancestor. So they would have been like 8th cousins or something like that, I guess. But it was a very interesting story. And one of the women, Betty Kilby, is going to come back in September and do another presentation for us in 1619. So we're looking forward to that. She was very much involved in the integration of the schools in Virginia. And we've recently seen a documentary in our civil rights presentation about the integration of the schools in Arkansas, where they, around Brown versus Board of Education. And it was a similar kind of situation when the schools in Virginia were integrated, and she was one of the kids who was involved in that. So she's going to come talk about that. She was here before with the Cousins book, but the focus of that was an entirely different thing. So this is going to be an interesting presentation coming up in September. So that's an example of the kind of information coming out that people don't know about. The interesting, and I've because I go to that group, I've heard a lot of the stories about the different branches of the families, and it seems to me that the Black side of the family always knows about the other side, and the white side never knows that the Black side exists after a certain number of generations.
But they have no reason to know.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you bring it to them and open their eyes. They know that this went on, but how many generations back?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just learned about, for the last 5 years, I've met all these. They would be my second cousins, I guess. I don't know. Anyhow, my grandfather was, he had his degree from Atlanta in Georgia, in 1862, 63, something like that. So he was a Presbyterian minister. He worked for the government. He was a teacher, and they beat him up, and he left. He was in Macon, Georgia at that time. He was raised in Charleston, South Carolina, and he went to St. Louis, and he had a wife and had 2 little boys, and she passed, and so he sent those little boys to their maternal grandmother in Charleston, South Carolina, and one of the little boys was named after his father. And he was very angry with his father because he didn't raise him. But anyhow, this man had family. And so I know an Olga Taylor, who's this is my grandfather is her great grandfather. Anyhow, this same Jesse Patterson, and he got had another family, and he had my Aunt Alma that I'm named after, that was old maid school teacher in St. Louis. And then he was a Presbyterian minister there in St. Louis. And then my daddy was the baby of the family. And so we found out in my family there's preachers, teachers, and like that. And in this whole family that we've met again, they're all preachers and teachers and like that, and have done extremely well. And these are the kind of things you find out because slavery and the times made lots of changes for people. When he went to St. Louis, he had an uncle that was there, and that's why he ended up in St. Louis. And so I think what you're doing is wonderful. We need to have that kind of, as much as this as we can, because people need to know. There's not much they can do about it, but they can pass the word that somebody might pick it up and do something. And that you put it out, and it maybe, and you put something out, somebody's going to pick it up and go from there. You never know. Like the cousins found each other. There's constantly people are finding out they've got, remember Roots? And he and all his family and all like that, and remember the movies and went on, and that was a wonderful thing, and a chance for people to understand that these kind of things happen, and what happens with it and how people turn out.
The story of cousins, as I recall, was a white woman named Phoebe Kilby was doing something around town. I don't remember where the town was, but she looked around and realized that there was a Kilby family on the other side of town, and she noticed the same name. And so she started inquiring about that and found out that it was the same family name coming down through two lines. And then through that, she met this other woman, Betty Kilby, who was on the black side, and they became friends and then wrote this book together. And so it was a very interesting book to read the story of the reconciliation between these two people, but it didn't necessarily extend to all the families.
Yeah,
So,
I read about them. I don't know where I picked it up, but I do remember reading about those two people and how they had to talk to each other and get the understanding between them, and how good it was, and maybe it was in Women's World or People, one of those. But it's interesting, and I'm so glad that you have that you can let people know these things that are happening.
we had another very interesting presentation with a couple who is she's black and he's white, a black family and white family, and they talked about the kinds of things that they have learned being together that are, divisive kinds of things that they continue to grow and learn from their experiences. And they talked about how different things are when they visit the white side, and they're accepted by both sides of the families. So it's not a problem of them not being accepted as a mixed race couple at both sides of the family, but they go visit one side of the family and then the other side of the family. And they said the experiences are very different, which is pretty much true with any family, I think. But there's the whole racial issue involved in the separation there of different kinds of experiences and different attitudes. And they talk about situations where they'll be driving in a car and they get stopped by the police and they have very different reactions to the whole experience. So one of our more interesting presentations to think about the subtleties of the divide and how you experience it and how you deal with it.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking all my time of teaching and experiences and things I've started. Like I started the pregnant girls program with all the student. I got students from all the schools in Pasadena, but when I was asked to start it, then I called it Cope because I had this book where I used to read to the kids all the time about people that went through troubles and different things and how they coped with it and so these girls were going to have to learn how to cope and have their children and get their education and so forth. And it was a diverse group, and you never knew who the baby belonged to. The girls we became a family, and that's the kind of thing. Always, again, you just have to talk to people, and you have to exchange times and things, and you find things that work for you. And like you have what's her name, third grade teacher, what's her name?
Linda.
Linda. I don't know
Linda.
why I blanked, but Linda taught my daughter in third grade.
Oh,
And
okay.
she was so good to her. And I've never forgotten her because of what she did for my child. That was in a situation that Linda had to help make it work. And she did, because that was her job. Linda, isn't that what you did?
I hope so.
You did.
I hope so.
But you did that because you were a good teacher.
Thank you.
And things make it, and that makes a difference. What the kids get is more important than anything else. And so I'm glad I get a chance to see you again, because I've seen you.
Well, we're coming up to the end here. We're running out of time, and I have kind of monopolized the questions, which I didn't really intend to do. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say or comment on or ask about before we leave?
Yes. Can you hear me? This is Phyllis.
Yes, Phyllis, go ahead.
Yes. It's good to see you, Alma. We're part of the
You're
same
my younger
sorority.
sister.
Yes, definitely. I'm glad to see you. What are you doing now? I know you had a illustrious career in teaching. Besides Delta, what are some of the things you're doing these days, besides getting awards, of course?
Well,
What sort of things are you doing?
at this time, this last year has been hospitalizations and rehab,
Okay.
and so I've had to let a lot of things go. But I pass
Hmm.
on. I can talk, and so I pass
Yes.
on things to other people that I know can do, and I
Yes.
get them to carry on where I can't do it anymore. And I have a nephew who is the head of Danny Parker. He is the leader of the 710 uh,
Oh,
710
yes.
thing that's
Project.
project that's
Hmm.
being put together here in Pasadena. And I encouraged him to he's Stanford 8 years. He's a
Oh, good.
lawyer. He's a
Hmm.
businessman and an engineer. And so
Good.
I asked him. He's very involved in Stanford, but
Hmm.
I asked him to help John Kennedy, and that's how
Hmm.
he has ended up doing. And that's the kind of thing I can do now. I
Oh,
can pass
good.
on and encourage people to do what needs to be done, or give them the word, and then they can take it
Yes.
and run with it, because I can't do it anymore like I did.
Yeah, but you have a good wisdom and good advice, and that's always valuable. I'm glad to hear about Sylvia. I hadn't heard from her, so she's still around, just hanging in there, right?
She's
Sylvia
she's
Wiggins.
she's not too well right now. That's why
Oh,
she's been
okay,
sick. And I talked to her
okay.
yesterday, and she's not doing well, she said.
Well,
And so
be sh-
uh, I'll
be sure
pass
to
on.
tell her hello.
I will. Okay.
I want to mention that
Thank
the
you.
1619 has had a presentation about the 710 project and getting started with what they're doing with that. And it's on our YouTube channel. You could go back and see it. It's more than a year ago, I think. And I expect that we will have another follow-up presentation on that to learn more about where it stands right now and what kinds of things are happening. So we're looking forward to trying to stay on top of that and do more presentations. I also want to mention that because of the workload and everything, we're cutting back from the 1619. Instead of doing it twice a month, we're going to start doing it once a month, and we'll be doing it on the third Fridays at noon, this same time that we're at right now. So beginning in August, we're only going to be doing it once a month, but we will keep it going and try to keep it up and try to keep finding interesting people to come and tell us things like Alma was able to do and explore a lot of other topics that are of interest, having to do with race and discrimination. And, you know, we started with black-white relations because it came from the 1619 project, but we look at all kinds of discrimination as being similar things. So we've had presentations about Hispanic culture here and the Asian culture, and so we want to reach out to all of that. So we're open to suggestions if anyone has suggestions for things that they'd be interested in doing here. So
I have a
let
quick
us know
question.
if you
I didn't mean
have.
to.
Go ahead. Is that Phyllis
Okay.
again?
Yes, it's me. Just another quick question. After uncovering some interesting facts about my family history in Mobile, Alabama, outside of Africatown,
Uh-huh.
I started digging into piracy and contacted the same genealogist. And it appears that that's very interesting because I learned over one third of the pirates were people of color, if you want to call it. Some were escaped slaves. Some just happened to be there, and that was all along in the Caribbean, including the Gulf Coast and the Florida Keys. So I'm digging because I found Black Caesar. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but he's in history, and he joined up with Blackbeard, and he escaped to the Florida Keys. Finally, was captured after Blackbeard was his ship was destroyed, and he was actually hung in Williamsburg, Virginia. So that's another fascinating little fact I'm digging up. But who knows if you've discussed piracy or have any other chats like that, please let me know, or I'll be glad to share what else I uncover.
All right, great. Well, that's very interesting. And in this coming to the table group that I'm part of, there's a woman there who does Black genealogy, which has different challenges from white genealogy for pretty obvious reasons, but she specializes in that. And so you know, she would probably have something to say about that too.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So anybody else got anything else they would like to add?
No,
I
I
have
would,
a
I
question.
I would just like to thank Alma for coming, and mainly so I can see and hear you again.
Love it.
All right. Well, if there's
Yeah.
nothing else, I think we can look forward to the
Sharon wants to
afternoon.
talk.
Go ahead.
Sharon, are you going to talk?
I just wanted to ask you if there were one thing that we could do, leaving this meeting today or tell somebody else about as far as a project or program we could get involved with, especially with kids, what would you recommend?
That's a question for Alma, right?
Oh, is
Yes.
that for me?
Yeah, that's for Alma.
Oh, say that again, Sharon. I thought you were talking to.
Well, I mean, to the group too, if there were, what opportunity do you know about that we could go to get more involved with kids in the schools and, the generation coming up?
Well, I would say connect yourself with places, with groups like Pasadena Education Foundation. I can't talk enough about it and what they do and what they have done and what they're continuing to do. And we have Young and Healthy, And
Okay.
see, Young and Healthy, it works with the schools, and they're working with the parents now. They're helping them do their this excuse me, helping them do their stuff with IRS. They're doing all kinds of things, that because if they help the families, they in turn help the kids.
Absolutely.
And see, so that's one of the things that Young and Healthy is doing. And they always need help, and they need volunteers. And there's all these different places. We have the Union Station where they have all these families,
Mm.
and and see, once every fifth Saturday, there's a group of us at All Saints that fix the dinner for the families there.
Mm.
And they need people, and these are people with children, and if they have different things that they can't eat, we pay attention to that. And so if we look around, Pasadena is full of organizations that need people. And if you can't do it, you need to get family members and friends and neighbors to fill in for you. And that's what I have to do now, because I can't. I'm just starting to go out. It's been that much that, and luckily my daughter lives next door, and so that has helped me. But I can't go to all these places and things like I used to, and much as I want to.
All
Well, as
right.
you
Well,
said, you can talk. And that's a blessing for everybody who's lucky enough to hear you. So,
Yes, and
thank
go
you.
on Zoom.
yeah,
Yeah,
Good.
there you go.
Alma's very high tech here.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you very much, Alma. This has been very interesting and engaging. And this, of course, is being recorded, and you can find out about it on our blog post. Go to the PasadenaVillage.org and look under the blog topic 1619. We will have a write-up there with a link to the YouTube where you can see this presentation, or you could go straight to our YouTube channel and look it up there. It'll probably take us a few days to get everything put up, but by next week it will be available, and you can look there and see where we are. So thank you very much, everyone. It's been great. We enjoyed it. So good luck, and everybody stay healthy.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.